So it sounds like you guys made the agenda, so why don't you guys take it over? So,
Yeah, so I wanted to just kind of sit down and officially kick off our project. It's been a long time coming.
yeah, it's good, but all good things come to those who wait. Is that correct? Something like that?
So I think most of you know me. Maybe you don't remember me. I'm Kristen Darby. I'll be the project manager. And I'm based in Vermont. Technically the Burlington office, but I live in Barrie, so I'm not that far away. And I don't know what to say. My background is like water and wastewater engineering. I've done some like site design and septic design in central Vermont. And just really excited to finally kick this project off. And Caliani is going to be working with me at AAS. She's going to be one of our project engineers. And I'll let her introduce herself.
Yeah, and I'll be project engineer for this project.
Nice to put a face to the email.
Right,
Yes.
I guess you're that. And I've been with AES a little over a year now. I'm still feel fairly new, but I do have background in chemistry and water and wastewater engineering. I'm very excited to be here and kickstart the project.
So as long as, in fairness to you as well, maybe we should remind you of who we are. I'm Jay Kuchar. I'm chairman of the select board.
I'm Dennis Vincent, part of the select board.
And Richard Degree, Putnam.
And you,
Pat Saturday. This is all my fault. Actually, it's the planning commission's fault when we realized that this was an issue. So that's how this came to be, was through redoing the town bylaws. Context feedback.
Nikki Gunn, select board clerk and assistant town clerk.
Ladonna Dunn, town clerk.
Shelley Martin, town health officer.
Awesome.
all right,
Lynette can't be here today, but I know she's like our contact at DEC. I was hoping Ashwak from DEC would be here too. She's the indirect in charge contact. My understanding is she's gonna help us with the actual soil disposal part.
can I have a question about that?
Yeah.
So, what's gonna create soil disposal? You need, is it drilling holes? I mean, you're talking about like 2 shovel, maybe small holes that are gonna be boring.
So one of the options for the overall project that DEC wants us to look at is called the soil disposal option. And it's essentially some form of a community septic system is what they call soil disposal. And so we'll look at that as
Okay.
part of our.
So I'm glad you said that,
alternative
because I was envisioning that you were gonna be digging up something and you need a place to dispose it. That's not what we're talking about.
No,
All right.
So leach field, in other words.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
sure.
Leach field for the town of Westfield,
Yeah.
instead of going with Troy, sounds like, right?
We'll still look at Troy as an option in the report. But it sounds like based on our conversations with DEC that it's not gonna be easily approved.
Why would that be? If they accept us, why would that be?
Troy really wants it, because they could use it.
Yeah, Vermont DEC has a very strong opinion, it seems, of. I'm not sure what this is, but that's good. Oh, Astra.
Hello.
Hello, hi.
Hi, Ashwak. Do you want
Hi,
to briefly introduce yourself?
hello. I'm Ashwak Arfawi. I'm environmental analyst at the Wastewater program.
And can you also tell us like what your role is on this project?
So today I'm attending on behalf of the wastewater program to see the scale because I don't have any idea about the project. So it's to see the scale, the flows, and the design flow, etc., so that we can. We are the program that receives the application and the applications and permits the wastewater system. So if you have that system, it will be permitted by our program.
Well, thank you for joining.
You're welcome.
What Vermont DEC hasn't approved, basically additional discharge from an existing treatment plant in, what did Jen
The
say?
point source.
Yeah, from,
Project,
yeah. But it's been a long time since they've approved.
more than a decade.
Yeah. So we'll definitely look at it and talk about it. We don't know at this point if it's a viable option to move forward.
So if you have difficulties finding a suitable place for a leach field here in the town, that would be the only other alternative.
That will be the only other
Um,
alternative that will be evaluated.
Yeah, and then we will also look at basically a do nothing alternative. What happens if
Mhm,
we don't do anything?
mhm.
Sorry, did I miss something? You are talking about direct discharge?
We're just talking about, the town came to us originally with this project as maybe connecting the proposed village system to the Troy J pump station, which is like a mile up the road.
Just about a month.
We're only a mile here down the road here. So
Mhm.
they go.
And that pumps to the Troy J treatment plant. And so we were just talking about how we'll like investigate that as part of our preliminary engineering report.
Okay.
And
you.
is it DEC? Who is the? So is there, one of the reasons for not being keen on that kind of thing is that it might. They think it might cause sprawl,
That's my understanding.
and then all the land that's between here and over there is all conserved. The Vermont Land Trust, so it would
Yeah.
not cause sprawl. So anyway, just sad to say that.
Yeah.
And all the land around here is off of there too.
Yeah.
It's
All owned by him.
Well, yeah, next to the village.
Yeah, that's the road.
2/3 of the,
And the water table is 4 feet deep roughly.
Or less,
Westfield,
or
or
less.
less.
so anyways, we'll let you carry on.
Yes.
We can do a little-
Challenges that we talk about in our report. So we have some various deliverables, basically what we've agreed to do in our scope of work for this phase, which is the engineering report. And so we will evaluate the existing conditions of the village project area. And then that will include the field work. So we're looking at mapping the septic tanks and doing the test pits to look at the possibility for a leach field essentially.
I know they were asking us to help with the septic tank locations.
We had
Is that
talked
correct?
about that
Way
a
back.
long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, to help make the best use of our time.
Mhm.
Helping to get the landowners involved.
Mhm.
Most landowners know where their septic tank is. And so we figured if they could mark it with a flag, when we come on site to map those with our GIS system, we're just looking for a flag instead of wandering being like, where is this thing?
Right.
Yeah, did you, yeah.
Not,
No, just kind of,
not the tank's possession, but where it comes out of the building.
Ideally, we're interested in both. We're possibly interested in keeping the tanks and looking at that option. And then we're also possibly interested in just using the line that comes out of the building.
So what would the tank do if you kept the tank? How would you,
We can use them as kind of like a pre-treatment,
Mhm.
and it changes kind of the design of the leach field.
so if that tank needs pumping, because only this water will come from the tank, right?
Right,
Not the solids.
right.
So they still would have to pump their own solids.
Sludge will need to be pumped out.
Yes,
They would still have to pump their own tank.
yes,
So that really that would at least alleviate a failing leach field.
Right.
But they would still have to pay to have their tank pumped.
yeah,
Okay.
And then maybe some of those tanks are old metal tanks that are probably, you touch them and they're gonna collapse.
right. And so that's
So,
part of what we're interested in finding out. We have from DEC, it's like a little survey that the homeowners or landowners can fill out that says like, this is what I know about my system essentially. And based on age or type of tank, things like that, we can make the decision of, is it worth it to keep the tanks, basically?
Mhm.
Excuse me, do you have an estimation of the design flow for the project?
Not yet. That is part of our like next step process. We need to determine like what the sewer service area is and which properties are like involved with that. And then we'll be able to figure out what our design flow is.
Okay, thank you.
and the process to get to that, to help make that decision, will it have something to do with topography in the village? You know, what flows which direction and all that kind of thing. I think we had a little bit of that conversation before.
Yeah, and then the other factor is your designated village center. We can only include properties that are within a quarter mile of that.
From the outside boundaries of that?
Yeah, so
That's
if
still
you
gonna
look
take in quite a
at
few.
this map that Kelly on you passed out,
It's that
it's
rounded.
the pink
Mhm.
is that quarter mile buffer.
Yeah, that goes out quite a
It's
bit.
a long ways.
That's probably beyond.
Mhm.
Look at town garage and all that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but again, topography will affect it all too, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
well, it depends where we end up.
Exactly.
If it's going, I was kind of thinking if it's going to Troy. For instance, but that shouldn't be all we're thinking about. We should be thinking about whatever other potential that you might come up with.
Yeah, so we'll look at all of the options.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Obviously, our primary deliverable is the preliminary engineering report. You guys will get the full report and all the figures and tables that go with that.
Including the cost evaluation.
Yeah. Yeah, with the costs.
That pink perimeter line. It's probably not, if you're going from the outside perimeter, the outside measurements of the center is. Okay, I'm asking a question and I'm kind of seeing something different. The line that you're drawing the quarter mile from
The outside
is
one.
it's not the village limit. Is it?
No.
Because the
there-
village limit goes farther than that on Route 100, say heading towards Troy. Because I can see where the loop road comes in, that's not even a quarter of a mile from the village at all, and it's not included in that thing. You see where the loop
Yeah, I
road,
see what you mean, yeah.
I mean, that's fine. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not,
And even the cemetery road way over here, that's not even a quarter mile, is it?
probably not.
How come it has to be the designated?
That was something, so Emily of DEC, if you guys recall, it has something to do with the village wastewater program that you guys, that your project is like part of, is the designated village center is like what makes
District
you
water.
eligible for the funding.
Okay. That's,
So-
that gives us the benefit of that funding.
Right, and so that's my understanding is why it has to be the designated village center. Lynette is our new contact. And so we can ask her more specifically if we need more info.
So it's
on that.
not the town limit, it's the
Right.
center of the village limit,
It's
the center of the village.
Yeah, because it's not,
Minimum.
Quarter mile around the center of the
like the
village.
village goes up to the town garage,
Right,
for
right.
instance, you know, and it's not. It's not-
This is what we, remember when we had places before you came on?
When we got the village designation.
Yeah, it's a
But-
special designation.
Yeah, so that didn't include the whole village.
No, I don't think it was the whole village. Remember
Yeah,
that?
we had to, they had certain criteria
Yeah,
and.
okay.
And whatever that back and forth was, getting to be too
Mhm.
far gone to.
Yeah.
remember, but
So,
That's what that pink inner line is.
Yeah,
That's the
I've seen that.
designated,
Yeah,
it's not the village. It's
Yeah.
the special designation that we
Where
apply
it doesn't
for.
include the whole village.
So the inside line looks like it's where the water district, most of your water
About-
district people. In, except
Well-
the last three houses,
Except the town garage is on town water.
yeah, and the last three houses too.
And School
on the-
Street's
on the
not on
water side
there.
here.
Yeah, right, so
It
I'm not
goes-
sure if that line is accurate, I don't know, if it's
Yeah.
accurate or not, but. I'm just questioning.
It's accurate for the village center designation.
Correct, I guess that's the different, yeah, which doesn't include all the water district, for
Correct.
instance. Yeah, okay.
so if there were new properties being done, could they hitch up to the system if they're beyond this later?
It- Not if they're beyond that outside pink line. If they're inside it, we can, in our design, create enough capacity in the system to add on like future connections. And so that might include like mother-in-law apartments or things of that nature that maybe don't exist yet, but.
As long as they're within the,
This quarter mile,
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And so part of what we have to do with the report is what's called an environmental information document. So you guys will get a copy of that. Like Kalyani said, we'll include our like preliminary cost estimates for all of the alternatives that we look at to give you guys a rough idea of what you're looking at for costs. And then we'll be present for all of your public meetings at 30, 60, 90%, and then your final bond vote.
So when you say cost estimates, is that just because this isn't the design phase? Is it for the design phase and the building phase or just the design phase?
So the cost estimate will be basically, here's what it would cost to construct this alternative and this alternative and this alternative. And within that, generally what we do is based on the construction cost, we estimate what the design engineering fee is based on like a percentage. So we wanted to give the town a chance to kind of refresh our memories and give us an understanding of the background and the context for why you're pursuing this project.
I think Pat had described that.
Yeah.
It's her fault.
We should say planning commission.
It's her
Pat's
fault.
chair.
Chance to like refresh our memories and make sure we're all on the same page with like the context and the background for like the need for the project.
Sure, just a little more of what I said on the introduction,
Yeah.
that an awareness of the high water table issue and came about as part of a major rewrite of the bylaws, municipal bylaws, and I mean, that's.
That raises a red flag.
That was like, I mean, I heard stories, I don't live in the village, and, you know, multiple people having pumps running and pumping water out into the highway ditch, you know,
That's,
and then realizing that banks know this, banks know that a lot of, this is not uncommon for villages along near rivers or in river valleys. And that basically people wouldn't be able to sell their home because most of these lots don't have the space to put a replacement tank in. And it was like, holy crap.
Yeah,
That
it
was,
was-
that's pretty much it. And it was just like, okay, who do we gotta talk to? And then just started the whole.
But then maybe you're getting to it too, but it was some law that legislature passed that allows for more buildings per lot and so on in the town plan and all that.
Right,
And,
well,
and that limitation that you're just talking about would really prevent it. So if-
right, so it's more than the one thing of the people who, most people, their homes is their main asset and but it also, in rewriting the bylaws, we were accommodating the new legislation around that any lot where you can meet setbacks, you can have what's called a I can never keep those, accessory dwelling unit, which could be a little add-on, a bump out on a building, it could be a separate building, it could be an apartment over garage. And you can't stop that now in Vermont, every town, you have to allow that. And so we were incorporating that, and so, yeah, those are, thank you for that reminder. Is that it? I mean, other questions to fill that picture in for you?
No, I think that gives me a good background.
And my understanding is that we don't have a documented proof failure of the septic or any data.
No, nothing.
No, because they're all private and they're all built in different.
Yeah.
In different eras.
50 years ago, some 75 years ago, some.
I know,
Maybe
I know, I
older.
got a steel tank of that church, that's a metal tank,
Yeah,
that's a fire.
and those tanks, a lot of times at this point now, they've been in there for 50, 60
They're
years.
gone.
You pump them and they collapse.
Yeah.
The only thing that's holding them up is the liquid that's in there.
Yeah,
And they might still be functioning.
Probably work better than the system.
Who knows? Who knows?
I'm sure there's some steel tanks kicking around.
yeah. And homemade tanks.
We had, that's what I was just gonna say, at one of the trailers that we had bought, which didn't exist
Cedar,
anymore. It was built with cement blocks.
Yep.
And it's still covered. And when we had a little problem and we took it up, we said, whoa, and we took that out, put a new cement tank, this is quite a few years ago. But, yeah, it's some of the background.
I see some other railroad ties too.
No kidding.
All of one.
The other piece of this is the weather science, and that Vermont is getting more intense rains.
Yeah.
When we have, and overall more rain, and I think UVM's up to like 10 or 12 years of data, and man, the numbers, the rain is the rain, and so so more ground saturation at any given time, and so there's just less capacity there for soaking up, a 3 or 4 inch rain. In some places, on some land, is not a problem. A 3 or 4 inch rain on a lot of other pieces of land is a really big problem.
So if this village didn't exist, and if somebody wanted to start building the way it is now, it would probably never happen today without a wastewater system.
Yeah,
Because probably nothing would perk in this village.
No, there's anyone for
You just dig, or we just put a new sign over there, right? You dig 3 feet and you get water.
That's definitely the picture that was
Yeah,
great, but
looking at
soil
the
analysis
soils
and not great.
Yeah, but then another, I think you were at one of the meetings with Troy somehow, and they mentioned about us taking us. to one meeting.
They would love to have our capacity because it would help their system be more.
They need more flow.
Yeah.
Troy does.
Okay.
And
We'll
they're
definitely
distance wise, the math works.
Yeah.
We had a gentleman that works there, he was at one of our Selectboard meetings last month, and
Yeah.
he mentioned that.
Yeah, it's not like we have to, it's not like we have to beg them to say,
No.
please take us, they would love to get
Right.
this capacity.
Yeah.
Because they have the capacity, they would like to get this volume. So anyways, yeah,
And so if you're thinking about kind of long-term outcomes. What are like your main goals for this project? Not just like the reporting phase where we identify the alternatives, but like. What is your like ultimate objective?
I have to be happy to chime in, but so for me, let's say, just as a, you know, as a resident of this area. The property values in this town would not diminish, they would increase a little, but they would actually, you know, with. The way now when you sell a home and if you have to have a certificate of this septic system that works and all that, I wonder how many of them could get that. So the value of the homes will increase. Or at least not decrease, that kind of thing. The potential for surfacing storage and all that kind of stuff will diminish. That's me, I guess.
You said it all, you're right.
Yeah, you're right, 100% right.
Sure.
It would take care of the, you know, the wastewater, wouldn't have to go in the rivers either, you know,
Mhm.
especially they got 3 foot. 3 foot, the water level.
Yeah.
I mean, I completely agree with what Jake said, and another thing is the statewide goal of density. I mean, we could have more density in Westfield, and that's simply not possible.
No.
I mean, the land base is there for it. G's are generous, a lot of these lots are generous, and you could put in an accessory dwelling in it. But that's not gonna happen. And then the other thing is, I think it's just, it's not really answering that question, but it's somehow related, I'm not sure where it fits in, so. And that's, how this will get paid for. I think that would be something that people would want to be clear, we have a separate water district. Not really, you know, what it's going to look like, and is it typically based on the number of bedrooms or the number of toilets, or, you know, what that looks like, because it's different in different towns. And I think that, I mean, that's how people are gonna be paying for this, and they're gonna wanna know, and it's, I guess bedrooms are often used as, you know, the number of bedrooms in a house versus.
They don't meter that, right? That's not metered.
No, in Troy, they got allocation, I own a property in Troy, but they got rid of it, they had an allocation, they had to pay so much a quarter.
Right.
And even though you didn't have anybody in the house, you still had to pay the allocation.
Okay,
If you didn't, they would
so
take
whatever
away.
it is, you know, that's
how they were set up.
that we're as transparent and complete as we can be with the cost, because that's what's on people's minds.
Yeah,
And so anyway,
Because if you didn't give up the allocation, you weren't sure if you're gonna get it back. Or you still had to pay for it back, no choice.
Mhm.
yeah, so the way that municipalities tend to do it is one of two ways. You either meter the sewer output, which I don't know very many towns in.
Do they use the water meter for that?
Yeah, I think they meter on the intake and
they have to
Yeah.
meet.
I figure if you take
Yes.
the water, it's gonna go.
Right, and so sometimes they use water meters.
That you have to pay the water card.
A lot of times it's by what's called EDUs, which is equivalent dwelling units. And
Approximately 2.5 residents per ADU, so based on that, for the estimation.
And then that's where, regardless of whether you're using it, you have to pay for it.
Right.
If you had an apartment, you pay more for sure.
If you're hooked up, in other words.
It'd be
Right.
pretty easy,
Yeah.
so, you know, say you
Typically,
build a couple of
vacant
apartments.
lots have like a reduced fee.
Quarter.
Yeah, vacant lots, I think, tend to pay for like the maintenance. but not for
Just
like
to,
the actual.
just to retain the.
So what do you mean by the
application.
vacant lots? Something without a dwelling on it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's not
yeah.
developed, either there's no dwelling on it
Yeah,
or,
A lot, but there's no buildings there.
But you can have a line to it.
Yeah, when I took the house down, I still had to pay for allocation.
yeah,
They weren't guaranteeing me if I would build a house there. They didn't guarantee me that I would get it back if I give it up,
Right,
so I still pay every quarter.
right.
right.
Anyway, that kind of math
Mhm.
is, I think would be very helpful for when, like this first public meeting that, because that's the first thing we heard.
Good, they're gonna
from
say the
people
first
was
thing,
about
well,
cost.
It's gonna cost me.
So,
I think it's a great idea if it's free.
We know the costs are gonna be a big factor, especially in a small town like this. Obviously, we won't have project costs at that first 30% meeting, but we can talk about kind of the process and kind of what we're explaining now.
and what numbers do you know, what are, we don't know where people are, where they're at, where their information is accurate or not accurate.
Right.
And so I think just being
Well, on the
ready
wa-
for that.
On the water district, you only got like 44 people maybe? But that's get the water from town, that's just the town people, right?
Right,
That's the
Village.
people in the village.
This map,
right.
this map is like the water system, that
Yeah.
whole circle.
Yeah, the water,
It's like 44 customers.
yeah, it's only like 24, yeah.
Couple grade.
It's its own entity. The town doesn't run that, it's a fire district.
Yeah, it's its own little municipality.
Mhm.
It was privately held up until, I don't know, was it 20 years ago, maybe? And then the people who owned it basically gave it to the town for $1, just to walk away. So then the municipality had the ability to borrow money at negative interest, I think, to build that system, to upgrade that system. It's sort of like what we're doing from here, but I think it was negative interest, not just a forgivable loan, so
Yeah.
they were able to get this whole system upgraded. You remember that? You
I was
you-
on- I was on
I
it.
remember it.
Yeah, so anyways, yeah, that was a welcome
That was a
thing.
good project.
The water source didn't change, but the system was really old. Leaking.
Mhm.
So that group formed, the users formed a water district, a fire district. I don't know why fire district, I guess that's a legal term, but
Yeah, that happened about 94, 95, if I remember right.
yeah. And who knows, maybe something like this that model might work, something like this.
Mhm.
Kristen, I think Lynette was involved with that as well. I used to work before I retired, I worked for DEC.
Okay,
And I worked in wastewater management, environmental assistance, and when I retired, I was a facility engineer, so I worked with Lynette.
okay.
And I know that she was working with the water district, so she might have more information too.
Okay, that's good to know. That's good information. So I want to just go over kind of our project schedule for just this report phase. And so we're gonna start with our 30% report, and that will include all the existing conditions. And so we're going to do the field work, so the septic tank and lateral location survey, and our soil test pits, kind of late spring, early summer. And then our contract says that we'll have the 30% report for July. And then once that's submitted to DEC, we'll have our public meeting and answer questions and respond to DEC comments. We'll revise the report and add the next section, which is the alternatives analysis. And that's the 60%. And so in December, when we do that public meeting, we'll be able to actually present alternatives. And then 90% will be in April. And that's almost a finished report. That will include cost estimates. It will have like all of the figures and tables that we need. I mean, most of those will kind of just gradually be built as the project goes, but it'll basically be a finished report. we're just waiting on like DC comments.
Yeah, so potentially, I'm just trying to visualize the process. You send the report to DEC. Of the different alternatives.
Yeah.
Is it conceivable that they might say, no, this one's out. Let's say you send them 3. We may end up with 2 or even 1. Is that possible? Or
Yeah, you already have DC. No.
or maybe you already know what not to send them, what kind of thing not to send them, so that you already have a good idea.
Sense for sure. And we'll be like in contact with Lynette like throughout the process too. And so if we ever are kind of like, we don't know how DEC will feel about this, like we could definitely have a meeting with her
So
to
you
kind
have-
of. We don't want to get to a point where we're submitting something that they're saying,
Which was already a
No.
no-go from DEC.
Okay, that kind of
Right.
answers my question.
um,
So then if you have a couple of viable options or 2 or I don't know, whatever number. That DEC would say, yeah, we could live with that, then is it up to the town voters to decide which one?
yes, so eventually, when we have a final report that's approved by DEC. The town. Is it just the people in?
Yeah,
Or is it the
people
whole
who-
town That does the public vote?
What's that?
I'm not sure.
Just the users?
Yeah, who votes on it?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
question too.
That part, I didn't even think about. until
depends who
I-
flips the bill.
Yeah.
If the whole town flips the bill or just
Yeah,
the village flips the bill.
If I'm not
You
paying.
know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
That could be,
That was the way the water thing went, I think it was just the users.
Same with Troy, I wasn't on the system in Troy. I didn't pay a sewer,
no,
Yeah.
I paid water, not sewer.
yeah, but the whole town, they got, I don't, I think they're just set up in town, I'm not sure what Troy.
No, they were, I didn't pay,
No, you didn't pay him.
no, not sewer.
No.
Kuchar was the last one.
Jeans.
As far as voting, it'd be
It was the last one.
the town or the regular district.
And
The
then
town.
it went across the road from me, it went to Desjardins, Raymond LeMay, that whole line up there is all in the sewer. My house was the last one that had it on that side of the road.
You might also consider those that are not, would not be on it automatically, but who could potentially get on it too. Those people might want to vote as
If
well.
they're in the, yeah, if.
If they're in the area, yeah.
If they're in a place that would potentially make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that why would be that outside buffer? You know, that would be. People can all vote or not. But
We can definitely find out more on like who would be eligible to vote. I initially thought it was the whole town, but I'm questioning that because the whole town is not involved in the project. So,
Yeah, my understanding is, like you said, it should be everyone within that 1/4 mile buffer. With the village center plus the 1/4 mile buffer.
and I left it as kind of a to be determined timeline for that. We initially were hoping to do a public vote just in conjunction with town meeting. Everybody's already voting, it's easy to just add. But with a final report in August, that's waiting like 7 months.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a long time. So I figured we could just kind of leave it and coordinate it as it comes.
especially given the fact that it would probably not be all the town residents. It'll be maybe a more finite group, it would be better to do it not a town meeting.
Right,
the town meeting, but everybody.
right. That was when I thought it was probably everybody, but if it's not everybody, that definitely doesn't make sense. Do you have the DC certification page? Yes, I do. So I just really quickly wanted to touch on the approved budget for this project, so. The funding gives the town $125,000 for the fourth phase, this first phase.
Mhm.
Let's see.
And we have
So we-
Yeah,
lump sum for the engineering report at just over $86,000. And then the pieces and components of doing that. So the data collection, the environmental review, our GIS services and soil analysis. And then our meetings are all not to exceed, and so that will be like a time and materials, like whatever we spend on it up to the approved amount is what will get billed.
If you go over,
The state controls it.
Then
they,
it's our loss.
I just wanna make sure, no place in the town, cause we.
Yeah, we will bill more than, so like for the data review,
Yeah.
the 6,222, we won't bill.
The first contract, we've been over 125 and that was, that wasn't gonna work.
there was a lot of potential add-ons, which
Yeah, we
would
were-
made us nervous, but,
Being a small town, that would,
yeah.
Yeah. And so we invoice monthly at AES. And the time and materials, the not to exceeds, will for sure be billed monthly for like the work that was done the preceding month. And the lump sums, we kind of have to figure out how we want to do it because DC does that like line item, I guess, based on the 30, 60, 90%. And so we can still bill monthly.
who is responsible for paying this? Is it the state gonna write the checks? Or
We are.
or we are?
We write the checks and get
And then
reimbursed.
We get reimbursed from the state.
Yeah,
Okay.
Do you know when we might have asked this at an earlier meeting, what the turnaround time is? If we pay it, do we have to wait a long time for the reimbursement or is it like a week or?
That's the question we were hoping to
yeah,
get answers on in DEC
yes.
meeting today.
Okay.
Maybe Asher could throw some light on that part.
Sorry, excuse me, I just missed that. Sorry, you had a question for me?
Yeah, the question was, when we get billed. By, these folks. And pay them. How long does it take us to get reimbursed?
I don't have any idea that for that, all the funding questions, you have to ask Lynette. I'm only dealing with the permitting part. What I just wanted to say, when you start the soil investigation and test pits, I'm the person to reach out to. But all the funding question and your question about the eligibility, it's Lynette who is dealing with that.
Right, got it. Thank you.
You're
We'll
welcome.
follow up with Lynette and get an
Okay.
answer to
Yeah.
you.
Just so that it doesn't hurt our checking account too bad because we have.
Like budget.
We have a finite amount of money in our accounts that are already there for something else, right? So if we have. to
Right, you're
spend-
waiting on that reimbursement
Yeah.
to
If
help
it,
cover that check.
Mhm.
We have a lot of grants right now, so.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right, we're gonna be doing this
Right,
kind of
and
thing for some other ones too. And at least we know that those are gonna be like maybe 7 days or something, that's,
Mhm. Yeah, we can
okay,
ask.
you can let
Lynette
us
on
know
that.
when you know more.
So
are you thinking that the lump sum piece of it would be in 3 chunks, is that what you're saying?
that's how DC will reimburse you.
Yeah.
And so. I'm just gonna be-
Yeah, and you're billing monthly.
Right, and so we
So
bill
it's a-
monthly, and so that's where. We kind of need to have a discussion of
Mhm.
how is that piece going to work?
Sure,
Um,
yeah,
we can
because
still bill monthly,
so when you build monthly, maybe I'm asking too many questions here, but when you build monthly, will you be billing? A portion of that lump sum piece, the $86,000? Like a month's worth or,
right, we would bill kind of what had been completed in the month. prior.
Yeah. And if we only get reambrsed,
3 times.
3 times.
yeah, we may be holding the bag for a little
6 months.
longer. on that.
Right.
Yeah, three to 6 months. At least 3 months, we'll hold the bag.
Yeah. The phases for 30, 60, 90, they're like 3 to 4 months apart.
Well, anyways, whatever we need to know about that would be helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can definitely ask Lynette because that will probably
Give us a clear.
give you an idea of how you want to deal with that.
I'm wondering if
remember when Tom talked about it, I thought it was pretty quickly, the way Tom
it
talked about
sounded
it.
like it, but
When we were here like 2 years ago.
Yeah,
I thought
yes.
He said 30 days maybe, or was.
He said they process the checks, but the thing is, the checks only come every 3 months, so
yeah,
the numbers that might be helpful in terms of the town managing the checkbook would be like typically. Is it gonna be a third of $125,000 at 30? You know, at the 30, 60, 90, whatever the percent of the project is, whatever that. Just to sort of have a, for instance, of, let's say within $2,000 or $3,000. You know, that how much money that the town needs to have committed to pay you on the monthly basis, knowing that then there will be this rebate from the state. That, isn't that the number that would be helpful to have?
Yeah.
it would,
Would it be helpful? I guess I didn't say this at the beginning, I kind of skipped over. So my plan is every 2 weeks to send an update with like, this is the progress we've made, these are the next steps we're taking. In that email, would it be helpful for me to include, this is what we've accrued since we last invoiced?
of expenses.
Yeah.
Or
Okay, I can.
knowledge is
include that.
power.
Yeah,
That's
So
no problem.
in July, when you bill the 30%,
Yeah, I skipped that. Yeah, sorry.
so in July, when you bill the
Is
30%,
that-
that's gonna be 30%
30%.
of the 125,000.
When they get. up to that.
It
Yeah.
won't be quite,
Minus how many months you've already billed.
right, so it'll
Take
be
4 months.
30% of this
You
86,000
got 4 months to get there.
Yeah,
minus anything that like, if we've already invoiced, depending on like how we set it up.
Okay,
And these, the not to exceed amounts will be billed monthly. And so,
a portion of it, because are those,
right.
those
It
not
won't
to exceed,
exactly be 30%. It's like, maybe if you're breaking it out and making it very general, you could estimate 30%. But just, it's not quite that simple.
No, it ain't.
why is it so complicated? Is it because Vermont does it this way and New York usually does it monthly?
You know how New York does their funding reimbursements, but typically what AES does is we just bill monthly and you just figure out how you're paying it. Whether
So-
you're being reimbursed at that point or
Yeah.
not.
so we
Um,
owe it monthly, we can't wait for the 30% thing. to be
Yeah.
done. Yeah, so we could be on the hook for some of this for some period of time. For a couple months.
Unless they can wait 3
Right.
months, give
Yeah,
us 3
unless
month
unless you
period.
guys can wait. So
3
if you
months.
bill us in this month and we don't pay it because we know we're not gonna get reimbursed for 2 months, does that mean that you're gonna hate us now and you're gonna charge us a month and a half, a 1 and a half?
So 3 months, it's gonna be 30%.
scared.
I mostly just want kind of an agreement for how we'll invoice, like if we're gonna hold that until we hit the 30% mark. I'm perfectly willing to do that. Brad might be mad at me for saying
Yeah,
that,
you have to
but
ask your
Yeah,
boss.
exactly.
Well, you know the money's there
I think,
anyway, I mean.
was Brad here once? Was he here once?
I think.
There was somebody here one
Well,
time, we talked about the work.
this year,
Yeah.
to be fall.
yeah.
And I think he said he didn't matter if it took us a little longer, I remember, I could be wrong.
So you're gonna investigate it and give us an idea.
I'm doing that. And if I do that, when Calinati and I invoice, we'll just defer for the report, that $86,000. The 30% of that, we'll just defer it until it hits that 30%.
30% milestone.
Um,
And then, yeah, that would be easier
Which-
for us.
I'm fine with it. I mean, I'm fine.
We don't want you to get fired.
No,
Will,
you guys can work out the detail, let us know.
yeah, let us get an answer back from Lynette about the reimbursement timing. And maybe based on that, and then our discussion with Brad, we can kind of figure out what we wanna do with that.
If they don't come back, we know why.
Well, for us, it depends a little bit on the time of year too. You know,
Yeah.
when we're getting close to tax
Tax
time,
time, yeah.
our accounts get a little narrower,
Yeah,
you know, and then after taxes, we're a little bit more flush for a little
Yeah.
bit.
okay.
Anyways,
Yeah.
we'll wait to hear from you.
And so I kind of touched on this already, but there's basically 4 main points of community engagement with the project. So you'll have a public meeting at 30, 60, and 90%, and then you have a bond vote once the final report is approved.
I don't know, why would we have a bond vote?
That's for the,
I mean, that would be agreeing to a
Implementation.
certain kind of project, right?
Yes, and so that vote will basically determine if
We
the
will
project goes into phase
Okay.
2, which is like
design
design.
to
Yeah.
move forward with whichever way you guys come up with. a plan.
Okay.
yeah,
And
and
so-
and if by chance we decide we don't wanna do any of them, then there's no bond vote.
Right.
Okay, alright.
And so ideally, with us engaging with the people involved in the project at the 30, 60, 90% phases, we won't get to a point where they're just adamantly against it.
Right. Cause it won't be like new information to them, right?
Right.
Because we already have had that discussion.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I have a related procedural question. So for those meetings, the public meetings, do typically you have a member of the town that sort of manages those meetings? Or do you folks typically manage them, or that are outcomes with one or the other?
We can kind of do it either way. We can be there as support and kind of like a Q&A kind of role, or we can lead the meeting.
Okay, all right, so that's a decision that the select board will make.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
The important thing is just that the meeting happens to kind of check the box for your funding purposes.
Yeah, all right.
And so we are going to need the town's help coordinating our septic tank and water location survey. And we're hoping that you guys can kind of hand out flags and distribute like our little survey that's like, what do you know about your system? Before we come to do like the GIS mapping.
So
What's the time?
would it be helpful to mail everybody that's gonna be hitched to the system? A letter,
We should.
and then have the flags available for them here? Or, I don't wanna knock door to door, I don't think, but
Recycling is probably the best place to
Yeah. On Saturday
do a lot
mornings.
of this outreach. I would.
And so how do we,
but not everybody goes to recycling.
Not everybody goes to recycling.
Not everybody goes to recycling.
On Saturdays.
We should do a letter and.
We could do a letter.
The letter will get to everybody.
so
Should be
the,
so that there's a record of who it was sent to, so that we don't have
And
the.
then
all
get the
different-
flags.
Should we have the letter plus a small meeting or not? Maybe a lot, explain to people what's going on, or just a letter,
I think a letter
would be good.
and.
At the same time, knowing what's going
We could
on.
always talk to you at recycling.
Oh, yeah.
You're all working, so.
so does the letter go to everybody in town?
Everybody that gets hitched to it.
Because we're not sure yet. You know, this line is a little bit ambiguous.
But they're gonna get flagged, so the other part time don't need flag.
But you know, this goes out this far, but are we gonna try to send it just to people that are within this pink circle?
Or just, I think we should go with the inside.
So we really don't know really
Yeah, there's gonna
accurate
be,
boundary line for that,
exactly,
right?
that's my point. When you
You
get,
should said next steps first. So we're gonna determine this, what I'm calling the sewer service area, what that like outside boundary is. As like our next step.
Okay,
And, so we'll probably do that in the next like week or so. And it will partially be, it'll be like based on like this like 1/4 mile buffer and like which properties lie within that. But then you can also tell like some properties get like cut off. And so it's just kind of figuring out like which like homes or buildings are like in that boundary and not.
So what do you need from us to do that?
You got these guys in the back, there's some camps in here,
I might have to
you
get
know what I
back
mean?
to you.
I think there's some camps up here, there's houses up here, that's where the culvert is.
Yeah.
by the ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sugar House Road is in there.
Yeah. So this should be all.
it doesn't go to Bassett Road, so
Pretty close here, but
We should go, is that,
it's not very,
okay, it doesn't go up that high.
it's below the water, the water's right here.
But for like existing.
Yeah, I mean, the outside circle looks pretty good.
so some of the people that need it the most are gonna get it.
I mean,
Shelley,
roughly
do you have a
it's
question?
whoever
Wow.
You
is
have your
in
hand
that
up.
1/4 mile boundary.
I thought you-
I was trying to get Kristen because Pat was calling her.
Oh, that's fine. She said she could got me, but thank you. Is everybody done? Whatever. Okay. Do you have sample letters? You know, do you have sample language that to share with clients like municipalities for notification and explaining? Because it could be that we would send a letter to everyone in town so they knew about it. And then if there is an X before your name, then we need you to do the flag work or something. I'm just trying to think of, what makes the most sense. So that there's the fewest phone calls coming into the town clerk.
Right, that's what I'm kind of envisioning. You're gonna send these letters and you're just gonna get flooded with phone calls.
That's right. And so but we also need sample language to either give us a handout, this is what's going on. And so, yeah.
We could probably put something together pretty easily.
Okay.
Along with that survey
Yeah,
document.
Yeah, because none of us this is not our area of expertise.
It might also, if we sent it to everybody, it might also get other people worried as to who pays for it.
That's
I mean,
gonna,
we would have to have a lot of information ready.
so,
If
yeah,
a letter goes out to everybody for the town to answer those questions.
Right.
I think we should keep it in town, and that's my opinion, and then if we
We're
figure
gonna-
out how we're gonna pay for this system. Then we reach out to outside, if we do the whole town or just like the water district did. I don't know, it's
Yeah.
speculation.
Just,
And then as far as, some people are like on the border of this. Depending on what system ends up being recommended. For instance, if we're pumping Detroit. I would certainly not be able to get in because there'd be a force main by my place, so. If there's a different kind of a system, there may be some people that are available to, eligible, topographic map. Would make some people more suited to get in than others, so depending on what the recommendations are. Could have some bearing on how many people can get on. I guess is where
I
I'm.
would imagine you'd have to have a pumping station anyway for most people in here,
Yeah, there could be.
down here in the village, I would imagine.
Yeah, you get a pump,
It's-
Yeah.
And they're gonna go gravity feed up there, that's for sure.
So.
yeah, everything has to be pumped.
Be a pumping station here and centrally in the town, maybe two,
If it's going to Troy, for instance, or wherever it's going, but.
or wherever your leach field is.
Depending on, Yeah,
Right.
And the only place the leach field is up high.
Put a leach field.
what's that?
Where would we even put a leach field?
It'd have to be up high.
We don't own any land to put
Probably
it
have to
on.
pump up somewhere.
The lover,
Yeah.
the lover lost, no, Craftsbury was $2 million.
Because they didn't want to do it, they didn't.
Because they couldn't.
Yeah, we got water.
Lynn's email had a couple of points to consider. When talking about like potential sites for a leach field. She wants to make sure we include
Here,
looking at source protection areas, hazardous sites, wetlands, flood hazard or corridor areas. And that's, she sent a map in her email. Which I know her map is a little bit challenging to read without because the legend gets
Right.
challenging and I'm looking at it, trying to decode what it meant. But it's definitely, it'll be a challenge. I'm not gonna say it's not.
the only place for leach field in this town would be up on the hill.
And then we got water
Yeah, well, that protection area,
Right,
does that show on
Look at
here?
that.
right. You can't put anything there.
So that's just
Oh,
on
you
top of
could
the
put,
hill.
you could put it below it, but.
Yeah.
The only field I can think of is the first one before John Hamlin's
That
house.
was bumping,
Oh, no,
bumping then.
That's the
Yeah.
only field I can think of.
Somebody just planted some apple trees there.
Wow, I go really good after that one.
Larry Hinton bought that.
Oh, they did, that's under,
Oh, you can sell it.
but that's not very big, that's only like 4 acres.
How big a leach field have to be for something like this?
I can't even guess at the moment.
I
I
had,
haven't run.
I had a big one, the Arkin House, but
Yeah,
It's gonna be hard to find land.
Yeah, she encourages looking at publicly owned land. But also says if we engage with relevant parties. Then, yeah, like engaging with them. Including archaeology on the test pits, which Eleanor and I are aware of. And then she includes a guidance document, so. We'll definitely like look at a lot of that as we start diving into these next steps.
So if you can't find an area to put a leach field, would that bring the connection to Troy J
In my opinion.
possibility?
It does, I don't know what the DEC would say. And if we get to that point, we obviously want to have a conversation with Lynette before we submit that in the report. Because like I said, we don't want her to turn around and say, no.
so does it help in a situation like, based on what Dennis just said? Some of the people who have the power to reject something or not. To do, to come over here and look at what we've got.
make a phone call first before you do a lot of research.
Well, what I guess is that if they see, well, I guess the work you guys are gonna do is gonna help lead that decision, but for instance, if we know if DEC knows that the water table is close, there's no suitable sites here. And running a pipe to Troy to someone who has the capacity to handle it without us risking having something overflowing somewhere because we're trying to put it in a place that's not the best. Just thinking sometimes being at some place that you're making decisions on helps you when you realize it more than just seeing paperwork and say, no, we don't do that stuff. We haven't done this for 10 years, but we're not gonna start now.
Yeah, so if you can't find an area for it. And you continue this study. Is it, that money being spent? When we know we can't find a site,
There's no site.
you know what I mean? Because that's gonna be a rough thing to do here.
There's no site in this area, so I rather,
It'll take their study to prove that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we all say we know,
Right.
but if you do some test holes and find that there's water close by, that's documentation that you can use.
Right, exactly. It's literally exactly what Jake said, like the process of documenting, like, this is why this doesn't work.
Mhm.
One of the things that Emily emphasized before she switched. Was that the actual leach field doesn't have to be within this buffer, it can be outside of it. So we might be able to look at options outside of that 1/4 mile buffer.
Land trust.
Yeah, that's
On
right.
the hill,
Yeah, oh,
that's the only place to go is that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's sea level.
it's not sea level, but yeah. So are there any other, in looking at that, you hear about different alternative type systems that exist nowadays that don't need the same kind of, I don't know, there's different percolation pieces of equipment. Is any of that on the radar for this kind of study?
Yeah, so we'll start looking at some of that within the alternative analysis. So the alternative is like a leach field, but within that, there might be like sub alternatives of like a traditional mound system versus a drip dispersal system versus a stepper seg system. Like, we'll look at the various options, and we'll look at options like pre-treatment so that you don't need like as
Much capacity.
right. And so we'll kind of evaluate that within that like alternatives analysis that we're doing.
So I guess, let's get the process going, and then we'll have more
Yeah. Once it's
information to,
Right.
yeah.
Christian,
Yeah.
two things. One is that if it's, I know about the sprawl argument and that is DEC's main resistance. But if this is for a designated village center, that is, the town has done that work and supports the idea of designated village centers. If it was just limited to that you just, it can't go beyond, whatever the first defined boundary is. Partly because it's conserved land, or, I mean, there's a number of sort of hard things. I'm just wondering if you have any experience with that in other situations of that. Sort of moving the needle, the decision-making needle one way or the other.
I'm not sure how like hard set DC is on like no pump station connection. Especially if we do our analysis and we're like, there's no spot.
It doesn't go all the way up to your
If that's what it turns out to be,
Mhm.
and like we have the test pits to show like, you can't do it here, you can't do it here, you can't do it here. I don't know if they would.
Of course, you can buy and drive where you guys are already.
All we know is that they haven't in the last decade.
Right, right, the bar's high,
Right.
but it's not. It's not made out of kryptonite.
I mean, pipers.
Or it is made out of.
Yeah, right
I don't know
here.
which way it
Isn't
goes.
it worth?
Okay,
That
Right here.
discussion with DEC just.
You're right here
that-
somewhere.
Having that
on the
knowledge
green.
that, it's
Yeah.
not gonna be the most likely
So
option.
bad it could go, the buffer couldn't be bigger, there's houses out there, Yeah.
I'm struggling with the conversation. I can't hear. Oh, I'm sorry. What were you saying?
I was saying the goal at the end of the, when the report is completed and everything, is to have a project that goes into design knowing that it is funded by the DEC.
Okay. So that's good. That's good clarification. The other question, which could not even be worth exploring, is looking at the inflow. That if there, hypothetical, if there was a site, if the flow was limited to X. And there's all kinds of new plumbing now, there's, it's sort of amazing how plumbing has changed for drastically reducing the amount of certain flow, particularly from toilets. So does that ever come into this conversation, or do we just not even need?
Generally, I think it's just not really possible.
Okay, all right, that's fine. I'm not advocating that we talk about it, but I'm just wondering if that's going to be a piece. Well, if you reduce the flows to X, then you could put it you know, in Romney's back 40, you know, I mean, you couldn't because it's conserved land, but let's just say,
Doesn't
Oh,
But you have to treat it first while we.
oh, yeah,
Yeah,
you
you
still
have
have
to
to
tank
treat
and treat
it,
it.
but it just, if you reduce the volume by 40%, I just don't, I'm just wondering if that's a factor, that's all I'm asking at this point.
I mean. It. Would probably in practice, like in reality, affect the design flow or the actual flow. I don't think there's much in the Vermont wastewater rules that kind of gives you kind of like that allowance sort of.
Okay.
I can look into it,
No,
but
no,
off
no,
the top of my head, I can't remember. I don't think.
and I haven't seen anything either, but
Yeah.
I don't know them.
They tend to be pretty conservative with design flows. Or kind of the
Reasons.
opposite effect of like,
Right,
if there's more flow than expected,
right,
Yeah, and you never want to design something for the actual need at the moment, because tomorrow it's gonna be too small.
right, somebody
Yeah.
adds an
Oh, yeah.
apartment. and-
right, and the whole
Yeah,
point of
That's the
the
whole point of
village
this.
designation
Exactly.
is that you can increase the density here,
Mhm.
and
Right.
so,
Yeah,
so that is. And that's a state, you know, the state has said that, and so I'm just trying to think of the different pieces, so that's plenty of an answer for that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
speak right up.
Another variable too to consider is, you were saying earlier, fees might be determined by how many people are in the house or how many bathrooms there are. So if somebody adds a bathroom, or if more people come to live in the house, let's say you're an elderly person and your children come to live with you. With their children, how is that gonna be tracked as far as how much they pay for what they
Right,
get?
and that's why a lot of municipalities use like the EDUs, so it's like. A standard house is like one EDU, and that doesn't really change. Or they use water meters or like something to kind of measure the flow, but if it's just estimated,
It's just something to think about when you do your report.
yeah.
I know septic design is off
Right.
bedrooms,
That's
not
That's
bathrooms.
kind of why I paused, because my brain
Yeah.
went, but septic design is
just did it.
based off of bedrooms.
Not bathrooms.
yeah, 3 bedrooms.
You can have 20 bathrooms,
And-
3 bedrooms and.
Yeah,
5 bedrooms, no, they all go by bedrooms,
Right.
so the people living there.
Mhm.
Right. And
yeah, and it's nice to use formulas, otherwise we're gonna have to have the police in town to go say, oh, how many people are living in?
We don't want that to talk.
I don't want him calling here.
I
and
haven't even
saying,
charged by the flush.
You know, somebody.
So it's 11 bedrooms.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we can look at like, what are the rules for like accessory dwellings and all of that,
I mean, you almost have to design it
Yeah.
for double of what you're using or some.
I know in Troy, the price in Troy hasn't changed for the last 20 years that I know of. You know, for per home.
And then the more people
We
we
got
get,
Jay stuff, that's why.
yeah, the more people.
And
more-
when Jay came along, JP came along, that helped out a lot too.
Yeah. So the more residences are involved in this system, there's an economy of scale too, that. I mean, you get the limitations of how you dispose of it. But the economy of scale of building something, if you get 10 people helping to pay, is tougher than if you get 100 people with, you know.
If you got more people that joined in, you're gonna cut your cost down or keep your cost, level funded. Keep it
So, yeah. So I'm anxious to kind of see this process.
Are the solids separated before? Like say if it goes to like, to those treatment ponds? Or does it solids and all go right to the?
so the
Get treated.
solids will be separated through some kind of like pre-treatment process.
Mhm.
Whether that's a septic tank where they just like settle, or whether it's some kind of screening there will be some kind of,
Mhm.
So you're saying that, if it ended up going to Troy. Would we still have to have something to do that, or would that go directly? Because they have all that.
Yeah, they are.
right, typically, no, typically, we would just design something. Is it uphill to Troy? I know Jen did that, like.
It's what?
File thing, is it uphill to Troy?
Yes,
Yes,
There's
Pretty
some
level.
stretch.
We're gonna pump it.
no,
So the
but
Mrs.
where
Troy
the
going
tank
towards
is
Troy.
up in North Troy and that.
No, but they got a pump station. in
Yeah.
here.
Right, right.
But to get to the pump station.
Yeah,
you
it's
have to
uphill.
pump it.
Yeah,
They got a
Yeah.
one.
I've pumped twice, I think, yeah, well, it's a hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's two elevations there.
So, like a pump station itself might have like a grinder pump in it or
That's a big end
something,
to it.
but, it would just all get sent to the
Right.
treatment plant, and then at the treatment plant, it would go through the
And they-
screening process.
So in Troy, they dump, you got Tappan, you got Jetty, they all come, when they're in the area, they dump it in Troy.
Yeah,
And
they
they
do.
accept it.
Yeah, when they pump the tank, they'll back it up, they'll take all the sewage
Yeah.
from.
Sometimes they go to Newport, though.
Yeah,
When the others
Yeah.
up in Los
Yeah.
Angeles,
yeah, sometimes they go back and forth.
Yeah,
If you evaluate
Yeah.
the pumping Troy, option, will need some sort of. Details on their existing system.
Yeah,
They have a big system.
Yeah.
Three big ponds?
My understanding when Jake and I,
Operator. I don't know if she did or not.
my recollection, maybe you remember, Jake, was that it was so few, the system is so overbuilt because of an expected level of development that has not, and Jay and Troy don't ever expect to have happen up at the mountain. That they did not need to like increase pump size or anything
yeah,
for the little bit that would come from
Right.
Westfield, that they had
Exactly.
zero upgrade to their system.
Yeah.
It's just moving it from here to there.
The only way we'd have to do is pump it there.
That's good.
Yeah, it's very good.
That'd be a lot.
It's very good.
Save a lot of headaches.
it would be an insignificant amount. of
Exactly.
added volume for
It-
that.
Right, they were like, no way, not even close. And I think we asked them 200, if there were 200 homes on the system.
So I'm
I'm
gonna
pretty
get a quarter
sure,
of that.
and they said, nah,
No problem.
we don't have to upgrade anything.
They could use all they can have.
Yeah,
Okay.
but that would be a good thing to double check.
And I'm sure the funding there will help them
They have
operate
their
better
system
too, you know?
Yeah.
That really changes the overall cost.
Yeah, we'll definitely get in touch with their operator and just talk some things through so that we have. Like facts from them to include in the report.
Yeah, you could get a lot of information from them,
Right.
and then decide that.
As far as their capacity,
Yeah.
yeah, so if the Troy one ended up being an option. Vermont Land Trust would need to be involved because they hold the development rights on the property between here and there. Our farm and Tony Road farm on that side of the road,
Yeah,
on both
I
sides of the road, but.
think it's like conserved land, like all.
Yeah,
Although, yeah, so that rules out the sprawl piece of it.
Yeah.
Right on.
Right.
Great,
The
great.
concern about sprawl is not a possibility.
Well, to Zoom with my,
Mhm.
and see it.
Out there.
Yeah,
Well, you're gonna go right to the pumping station, right, about a mile down the road.
yeah,
They got pump houses
It's
in there.
right at the, where
Across
the
from
town
the fire
starts, right where the town starts. You can see the little pump house right there on the right.
yeah,
Right across the
The
fire.
village.
You do have to cross one brook.
This one,
You have to cross one brook,
Yeah,
right
that's
there,
nothing.
Colburn Brook. yeah.
Golden Brook, yeah. Which is not very big.
so next we'll. Work on determining the sewer service area. So that we can estimate a design flow. And Ladonna, I'll let you know what we need from the town to help with that. And, once we do that, we can coordinate, doing the septic tank survey and getting the landowners. The flags and the surveys about their system. And then
We can also work on putting together the document that can send out to
Yeah, like a
homeowners.
letter template, yeah.
It would be nice, at a minimum, to get all the water users to be able to get on. Just because, and well, actually, they're all in here, they're all within this. They're a little bit outside the village center designation, some of them, but, not too many, I can see some.
And Nikki's the treasurer and stuff.
Very good.
Yes, you know who they are.
Yeah, that.
Wears a lot of hats here.
Yeah.
Maybe goes
A lot.
little bit higher. Okay.
Yeah, you go by the. Little brook there.
Let's see it, I stole your pen. It's in my pocket from the previous meeting.
Were there any other questions or?
Pretty much well covered.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for taking the time.
No, my pleasure. I cannot tell you guys how excited I was to finally hold this meeting.
Yeah, well, we wondered for a while if it ever was gonna happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We haven't lost sleep over it. Yes, I am.
So I will reach out in a couple of weeks and just give like an update of like the progress we've made and. Probably touch base on some of that, like next steps. That we just talked about, but.
Chief Prodder. We need a chief Prodder. That's good.
So this meeting was technically a select board meeting, correct?
Mhm.
So we should have adjourned the meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second that, motion.
And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
3 votes, all unanimous. Okay. meeting of them. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank
Bye, thank you very
Look
much.
forward to the-
Bye.
You're from the Burlington area too, or you're from, Montpelier or no?
Barry.
Barry.
I'm Barry. She's driving back to Plattsburgh.
Blackbird, hey, we're about 2 hours.